you amazing, beautiful people. How you doing? And welcome back to another solo leveling cut content reaction video. So, AniNews actually released this one a little bit early. Now, whenever AniNews releases these, I always like to wait at least 12 hours after the release, just so I don't take away anything from AniNews. So I have waited, of course. This was released quite a while ago, but he released it early. Usually he's been releasing these on Saturday, but we actually got a Wednesday release? Or Tuesday release? Anyway, so one thing I want to address before we jump into this one is I saw a couple of comments where people were talking about how they are kind of disappointed in these videos, and I just want to say, when I'm watching these videos, I'm not doing it because I do see people complain about how much content was left out, but I think people are kind of misunderstanding, at least from my perspective. I'm watching these because I love the series. I think the series is awesome. I fucking love solo leveling so much. I think that's evident in my reactions. And I just want to learn more about the world. You know, I want more of the context. I want to learn more about the world. I don't feel like things are needed. I feel like the anime is great on its own, but as someone who's hungry to learn more and really loving this anime, I want to learn more. So that's why I'm reacting to it. Because I see some people saying that they're annoyed that people are watching the anime and complaining about how much stuff is left out. I don't want to say, if you are, fair enough. I haven't read the book, so I don't know. But that's not me. And that's not why I'm watching these. I've never read the books. I don't know what was left out. I'm just enjoying getting to watch more content. So yeah. And also, if people, let people enjoy the entertainment how they want to enjoy it. Because I saw a few comments saying that. And I just wanted to say, you shouldn't be hating on the videos for just giving people more content, you know? And at the end of the day, it's fun. As fans of this series, we want to learn more about it. And I feel like the anime is doing an excellent job. I feel like the anime is just wonderful and brilliant. And I've also seen so many people who have read the books and the online novel and are watching the anime and are giving it so much credit as well. So I feel like maybe things are just getting a bit misunderstood. Because I haven't really seen anybody heavily complaining or criticizing it. Most comments I see are people saying, it's a shame they left this out, but I understand. And I feel like most of the community is just really, really loving season 2. I'm just saying, I think it's pretty freaking awesome. I cannot wait for episode 5. But for now, let's check out the cut content from episode 4. Please like these videos. Please subscribe for more. We're so close to 50K. If you're not subscribed, press that subscribe button. Shout out AniNews. Link to AniNews' channel is in the description. Go support them. They're absolutely outstanding. And let's jump into my first time ever reaction to Solo Leveling Season 2, Episode 4's cut content.
It's good to see the fan service goes both ways in Solo Leveling. We're still going through the story pretty fast though, so for a dialogue-heavy episode such as this, I'm sure you can already imagine all the little interactions that were left out. Minor things like Chairman Go's desire for a successor, all the way to the introduction of Korea's former strongest guild known as the Reapers.
One thing I find interesting is when you have dialogue-heavy episodes like this, I saw a couple of other anime reactors and stuff online immediately going probably the weakest episode so far, blah, 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 blah. But I saw a lot of people saying it was a slower episode, but it was a great episode. That's the sort of camp I fall into. You can't have an episode that doesn't have dialogue like this. Otherwise, it just makes the story completely pointless. The action in Solo Leveling is what most of us are addicted to. But this stuff builds the action. You know, you need stuff like this to make it more satisfying. It was a great episode.
Reevaluation was definitely the focal point, but amongst that was a lot of lore behind hunters, guilds, and the relationship between them. So, if you want to see that and everything else the anime left out, here's all the differences between that, the manhwa, and the novel. Episode 16.
God, AniNews, you do such a great job. You do
covering
such a great job with these
chapters 61
videos.
to 66 from the manhwa and chapters 75 to 82 from the novel. With Sung having just defeated Metis, he was now sitting pretty at level 77, on his way to floor 76, and farming demons worth 1700 XP apiece now. That was the minimum reward for demons he came across now, since a new superior type was becoming more and more frequent. They were demons Sung estimated to be as strong as Vulcan, formidable opponents that made proceeding incredibly difficult. What caused him to truly become hard-stuck, though, wasn't the lack of food or the tough enemies around every corner, but rather the increasingly difficult terrain that made traversal near impossible. Last episode I mentioned how the higher the floor, the more destroyed the environment. Well, here
that's curious, because in the anime, it definitely felt like they were, it was food. That's what it felt like he just retreated because of food. So this other stuff is interesting. I didn't realize this.
In the 70s, everything was just a fiery hellscape. It was so hot that by floor 76, Sung would lose stamina just by standing still. His fatigue bar went up for every little movement now. This was no way to fight high-level demons, and it certainly wasn't the optimal way to clear the tower.
Okay.
So, in order to progress any further...
That is interesting, because to me, when I was talking about it, it literally just felt like bro was at a point now where he was just one-shotting everything, and he just ran out of food, so that's interesting.
Sung knew he needed to leave and come back with artifacts. Defensive items which would make these terrain effects negligible.
Yeah, and then obviously he's got all that money as well.
Why he wants to get reassessed, because where in the anime it's shown to be out of a desire to continue leveling, in the novel and manhwa it's simply because he needs these artifacts. He can't purchase or sell them without raising suspicion as an E rank, and that in turn means he can't clear the dungeon.
Based on this information, it definitely feels like the anime is maybe distancing itself from the online, like the books a little bit in a way, because this feels like two very different sort of like ideas.
Prevents the elixir of life from being crafted, and that in turn makes it so his mom can't be saved. All this stems from him still being an E rank, so if he wanted to achieve any of it, he first needed to get reevaluated. Such was the conclusion Sung had come to here. Now, there was a small difference in the way Sung's quest reward was revealed, since where in the anime Sung knows he's working towards the elixir of life from the beginning, in the novel and manhwa the recipe is only given to him after the quest is done. It's the undisclosed reward we saw last episode, the part of the blessed random box signifying his desire. I had totally forgot about this myself, but you gotta remember this whole dungeon was from a box telling him it'd give him what he desired. That just so happened to be the elixir of life, so as I'm sure you can guess, Sung's deepest desire is him wanting to bring his mom back.
Yeah.
What then will the cursed box give? Well,
I wonder if this elixir of life is a single-use item. I don't know if that's been explained yet. I also find it interesting that because in a way, if it's like, if you complete this, you get the item you most desire, you know what that is. Like, you know what you desire, but also you don't 100% know, you know? But in the anime, he does.
I guess that's for the system to decide. Whatever it thinks he needs is what he'll get. This was actually the reward he chose instead of a shop item because Sung figured he could always just get items from the dungeon. Plus, with the shop constantly updating with better items every day, there was a good chance he'd just end up selling whatever shop item he chose. Instead, he figured it was best to gamble on something with a bit more longevity. His final reward was the plus 20 in stats, and
that is curious. It gives him what he needs, and it gave him a key. So what does that key open?
All that went into intelligence.
He needs levels,
It brought his status to this now. Enough to make him feel confident against just about anyone,
what does
so
AP0
that was part
mean?
of why hiding his powers weren't a necessity anymore.
Damn,
the only thing he needed to confirm before his reevaluation was whether Jinho was able to succeed or not.
You've got to love it. It's just like any other gamer. When you're playing a game for ages and you start like leveling up, you get to a point where you realize, like you're like halfway through the game, you're like, shit, I should be leveling up this more than I'm leveling up this. And you suddenly change, and I love that that's pretty much what Jinwoo's done
So,
here.
one quick phone call revealed negotiations went well, and that was all Sung needed to hear before heading to the association. It was at the assessment office that Sung would be looked down as a delusional E rank because time and time again, an upset low rank would come in looking for a second chance. The chief believed this to be just another of those cases, so he urged the clerk to push Sung forward as fast as possible. To him, low-rank hunters like this were people you just couldn't reason with. No, it was far easier to just have them pay the fee and face reality themselves. This particular case had caught the chief's attention though because something about Sung's name seemed familiar. That's when he remembered Beck specifically asked to be notified if he ever showed up, leading to an immediate phone call straight to his office. Beck would then request to know Sung's rank as soon as it was taken, resulting in the chief having to witness the reevaluation himself. He personally didn't think anything of it though, because when a similar scenario happened about 3 months ago, that turned out to be a big fat nothing burger. It was a false alarm just like most of the other reawakenings. The only reason the chief decided to check up on this one then was mainly to humor Beck and the relationship he had with him. I mean, it was after all quite profitable to be a guild informant.
Yeah.
Now, it was during the time that Sung was waiting that the anxiety of the people around him would make him nostalgic. He couldn't help.
Yeah, I wonder if our boy AniNews is going to point out something that a lot of you pointed out as well, that we were able to catch in the episode. You see this conversation happening, and in the background, you just see the guy cheering, and I said that seems suspicious, and you guys said in the book it's because he gets a C rank or something like that.
Would smile as he remembered the way his own mind raced during this process. He had first imagined all the possibilities with his own rank, then extended that curiosity to the ranks of the people around him. Such was the natural mindset for those getting evaluated, and it was being exemplified again by the people around him. The only difference between now and 5 years ago was the presence of a whole bunch of recruiters. These weren't the recruiters you'd find from the Hunter or White Tiger Guild though, but rather a more parasitic bunch working for the small to mid-level guilds. They were a more desperate type seeking just about anyone.
Okay.
Why, might you ask, would that be? Well, because smaller guilds don't get a lot of applicants, it was only natural that they take the initiative themselves.
Okay.
The big guilds typically weren't very interested in low-rank recruits, so that left a whole bunch of hunters fresh for the picking right out of evaluation.
I guess it's the same when you like Google something. You Google it, you sort of pick the first couple of results, right? And my guess is that's the same thing here. One little trick I always do is whenever I Google something, I always go below the sponsored stuff and then start looking. That's literally how I search on Google. I don't know if anyone else does that. But yeah, that makes sense because a lot of these people are probably never going to apply for any of these guilds. They're never going to even find them once they leave this building. So it makes sense for those guilds to come to them.
Now, the reason I call them parasitic is because recruiters like these feed off the fact a lot of these low-level hunters are desperate. They know they can easily sway them with an attractive offer, but what they conveniently leave behind is that they're recruiting them for certain death. What I mean is that with every small guild wanting to become bigger, they'll often try to clear gates stronger than they can handle. That in turn leads to lots of accidents, and that translates into a high mortality rate. So, with a high mortality rate leading to lots of vacancies, recruiting new hunters became doubly important for these guilds. It's the core reason behind why their recruiters are always present here. Time would then
wonder what the
pass
casualty
as multiple
rate is on
hunters
hunters
went
then.
in and out, and for each that exited with a dejected look, every recruiter would
the pink
avoid
hood
them like
looks
the
weirdly
plague. It
suspicious.
seems as desperate as they were, none wanted anything to do with E-ranks. This is why rank is so important, because not only was it the determination of how powerful you were, it also clearly defined how much money you could make. The C rank was the level at which good money could start to be made, because that's the threshold where options started to open up for you. You could either make money by acting as a freelancer or join a guild and be in a more secure position. Either way, the salary of a C ranker was typically equivalent to that of a doctor or lawyer, plus the massive signing bonus they got if they joined.
I didn't
a
realize
guild.
it was that
So,
lucrative.
this was the rank the nervous guy was hoping for, while the confident one actually came out with an E rank. This led the nervous guy to let Sung go first, bringing us to the whole evaluation process.
Oh, nice
It's
touch.
here that once again Sung would be looked down on as a delusional E rank, but since the money was paid, the tester would proceed with the evaluation anyway. The chief would then enter right as the machine was bugging out, confirming the first S rank since Cha's evaluation 2 years ago. It's here he would then explain how the S rank isn't an actual ranking, but rather a special grouping for those who can't be measured. So,
You've got to love that. People keep telling me that, and it's something I do know when people say it. But yeah, you've got to love that the S rank is just like can't be ranked. You know what's kind of funny? I wonder if people have ever been accidentally evaluated as S ranks. Like one day the machine is just fucking faulty, and you just go in, put your hand on it, and the machine's just like having a bad day, and it's like can't evaluate. And you're like, shit, he's an S rank, and you're like, I am. And I just send you in, you're just like not a fucking S rank.
there's no actual indication for how strong the S rank hunters are in comparison to each other because the levels at which they're measured aren't quantifiable.
Yeah, it's impossible
The
to
only
know.
way to know for sure is for them to fight. Now,
That's
it was
kinda
while all this
interesting
was
and
going on
terrifying
that
as
Choi
well.
would be with Wu, discussing both the
That literally means like the lower end S ranks and the higher end S ranks could like one higher S rank could take out everyone below them. You know, that like it's kind of scary when you think about it that way.
Redgate incident and the ant mutations. He was basically asking if Huang Dongsu was the mystery person, then wanted to know how the investigation of the ant in Japan was going. The former was denied since Wu was there personally, then if the latter did in fact prove ants could fly to other countries, a draft would be instated forcing hunters to fight against them. It didn't matter what guild they were from, every hunter deemed necessary would be ordered to fight them.
Oh.
It was a mandatory enlistment Choi had no problem getting behind. Shortly after, Choi would hear all the commotion, not because the building was close.
Is that what is coming up then? A mandatory enlistment for hunters to go and fight these ants if they're flying out of the thing. Off of the island. I've got to be honest, they keep teasing the ants in the background, and I am so excited to see more of them, especially with the first episode and how I introduced them as these terrifying fucking monsters, man. And honestly, it kind of reminds me a bit of the movie Them. Don't know if any of you guys have ever seen that film.
But rather because he had a special sensitivity for these types of things. In fact, despite Wu not being able to hear a thing, Choi could hear everything clear as day. He knew pretty much instantly that an S rank had been evaluated. It was back in the lobby that every recruiter would be too stunned to move, since this was a level they'd never dealt with before. Like, if he was ranked C, then they would have just formed a line to talk to him. If he was ranked B, then everyone would be yelling attractive offers and guaranteeing him high-ranking spots right from the get-go. It was a chaotic method that actually worked more times than you might think, mainly because many people preferred to be the head of the snake over the tail of the dragon.
True, probably.
That chaos then settled down if the hunter was an A rank, because the A rank was where the large guilds got involved. Special privileges were given which the small and medium guilds couldn't even offer. Things like a guaranteed position in the main strike force and lots of financial rewards to go along with it. There was also always the option to start your own guild, because when you're at the A rank, you're powerful enough to attract other hunters to you. Not so many as to create a large guild, but certainly enough to establish a smaller medium one.
Gotta be honest, I feel like that might be what I would do in that situation. If I was an A rank or above, I might just start my own shit. Probably. I mean, it's what I will say is, in your life, if you ever are in a position where you don't need to be the boss, where you can't, where you don't need to have a boss. Sorry, I worded it wrong. Where you don't need to have a boss and you can be your own boss. I would always say that option is way nicer than having a boss. As someone who's had both for like most of my life, I mean, I've been working since I was 16, for like companies and all sorts of different stuff. And I've never had a year since I was 16 where I haven't been working. And I was working before that, but not like officially working. Yeah. And as someone who's been self-employed and employed, I can tell you right now, if you're ever in a position in your life, this is Luke's advice. If you're ever in a position in your life where you can be your own boss, always pursue that.
So, what happens then when an S rank is unveiled? Well, none of the recruiters would even try and talk to him. That is, unless they tried to act as his agent. Reason being that they knew recruiting him themselves would be impossible, but perhaps if they got into his good books, maybe they could be the one to send Sung on his way to one of the larger guilds. There was quite a bit of money to be made in being an S rank's agent too. So, the success of that quickly diminished any thoughts of the ridicule of failure, since one was momentary while the other lasted forever. It was right as the recruiters were about to make their move, though, that Choi would walk in, stopping all of that. It was an entrance that Sung was actually very grateful for, since it pretty much removed all the pressure on him instantly. Choi would then be so focused on making the Hunters Guild the strongest in the world that he didn't even consider the possibility of Sung saying no. You see, the moment Sung mentioned how he hadn't chosen a guild yet, Choi had already started imagining his status as a global superpower. That was how much power a guild with 3 S ranks had. In the end, Sung would disregard Choi just like how we saw in the anime. Beck's timely arrival would indicate he knew about Sung before this, then the random hunter hoping for the C rank would come out revealing he got it. Moving on to the hospital now.
You gotta love that. You gotta love that. I am really interested, because I said like about Jinwoo's relationship with his friend and how that was gonna influence his decision in joining guilds, because maybe he'd want to like join his friend's guild, but maybe he won't. Honestly, where Sung Jinwoo goes is as big a mystery as anything else in this anime, because he's a very hard person to read and I don't actually know where he'll end up.
Woo's first words to Sung were actually about the double dungeon. He wanted to know if Sung was the one who cleared it. This, I believe, is relatively important because at the end of the whole conversation with Chairman Go after this, Sung finally states that it wasn't him. It was a firm response that kept the mystery of the double dungeon open. Something to keep in mind for both the reader and the association. This also confirmed Sung wasn't masquerading as a false ranker, since if he really did have the power he had now, both Go and Woo knew he wouldn't have let his comrades die like that.
Yeah.
Woo would then ask Sung to meet the chairman, not as an order or a request to an association employee, but rather as a favor of great importance. It was an ask that clearly meant a lot to Woo, since accompanied with it was a deep bow Sung never would have expected from him. What went to intrigue Sung the most, though, was the fact Korea's strongest hunter was there to see him. Whatever the conversation was gonna be, Sung knew it would be more than just an attempt to recruit a powerful hunter to the association.
This is something I notice a lot about Sung, like the more I watch Solo Leveling, is he seems to drift more towards respect plus power, rather than just power on its own. But power is definitely his main intrigue. He has an obsession with how strong people are, how strong he is, how quick he can level up, and also just power in general. I mean, even when he was talking to the Korean, the best hunter in Korea, or the highest rank or whatever, the strongest one, that was the first thing he pointed out, how strong the guy was.
Combine this with the fact Chairman Go wasn't someone anyone could just simply meet, and that made Sung more curious than you can imagine. To put into context just how significant he was, not only was he president of the country's most influential organization, he was also a member of the National Assembly and the country's first S rank on top of that. So, with political and financial giants across the globe
makes you
begging
wonder
to talk
if
to him,
he...
passing this up...
You know what I've just realized? He probably knows Jinwoo's dad then, right?
wasn't something Sung believed he could afford. At least not yet anyway. It was before the two could meet, though, that there was first a cut scene where Chairman Go was talking to his doctor. It was a scene which not only emphasized Mr. Go's deteriorating health, but also his dire need to find a replacement. With the doctor calling it a miracle that he could even walk, the only advice he could give was for Go to take a break. This was unfortunately something he couldn't afford to do because the guilds around him were growing stronger by the day. They were practically as powerful as an entire country's military now. So, with him being the only thing keeping the association on even footing with these guilds, to step aside would mean to let the floodgates open.
You gotta love how when he throws a
It would
punch,
effectively
it's so
allow
strong
the
it
guilds to
blows
do
off his damn
whatever they want.
sleeves.
There would be no authoritative figure under which they had to fear repercussions anymore. This is why Chairman Go can't retire, since he's essentially the monolith symbolizing health and power for the association.
That is very intriguing, actually. That honestly feels like some information that if it's going to come up later, I'm interested to see how they introduce it, because that sounds like a very interesting thing that could could shape the future of the anime a little bit. You know?
It was then that one phone call would reveal the potential to change that, leading to a meeting where finding a successor was actually the underlying purpose.
Yeah.
At first he
Obviously,
wasn't planning to do
would
so,
never
but
do
after
that, though.
seeing the determination in the way Sung spoke, Go knew he was someone who could definitely be worthy of leading the association.
Yeah.
He most certainly had the power to, so the only thing that remained to be seen was his character. So, as the conversation kicked off with what the association was offering, a good example was used to show the different lifestyle of association hunters.
And that's why he said, oh, so it's only about money then, but then realizing it wasn't.
Like, where you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who even knew Woo's name. Had a person like Kim lived and become a member of the main strike force, he would be known as a celebrity everywhere. He would be more famous and make more money, despite very clearly being less powerful than Woo. Why then would Sung want to become a member of the association? Well, the core underlying reason was, as we saw, balance. Sung was well aware magic beasts weren't the only monsters out there, so he fully understood why such a balance was important to maintain. He knew losing it would mean risking control over powerful beings that couldn't be controlled. This wasn't what Sung was thinking about though, as what he was focused on instead was the successful path only Chairman Go could offer. Any large guild could provide fame and fortune, but only Mr. Go could have you sit at the National Assembly while also granting access to the government, association, and press. It was an incredible amount of influence that only he could provide.
True,
Now,
that's a good way of looking at it,
The reason
actually.
Sung's statement here resonated so deeply with Go was because fighting monsters was something he never got to do. By the time he had awakened as Korea's first S rank, he was already too old to fight in the dungeon.
Oh, really?
This forced him to look for other things to do,
Oh, I find that very curious. I assumed the reason he said that was because he was the same. You know, like he looked at Sung Jin-woo as like, just like me then, I wanted to fight. That was my presumption of the situation. I was completely wrong. It was more like a kind of a jealousy, not in a negative way, but like an actual like, oh man, I'm jealous. I remember feeling like that, but not being able to, you know?
resulting in the creation of the Hunter Association. So, Go would use his fame to gather all sorts of powerful hunters, establish an association built around him, secure a spot within the National Assembly, then help create laws that kept hunters in check. For as much as Chairman Go had accomplished though, he would always regret not being able to fight like how Sung so adamantly wants to.
Yeah.
So, to hear such passion from someone so powerful, well, his weak heart now pumped faster than ever. Despite the doctors saying it was ready to quit at any time, Chairman Go now felt as lively as ever.
Oh, I
The
love
rest
that.
of the conversation went pretty much as we saw, aside from some additional context that needs to be said about Go's drinking comment. There was an interesting saying that was lost in both the manhwa and anime.
Okay, this is interesting too because I just presumed this was him wanting to invite him out for a future drink, and it was that simple.
It was after asking if Wu would join him for a drink that Go would mention how the cup size of a man's drink determined the extent of the world he could take. Add that to this scene here, and Go's fascination with Sung's ability to drink makes a lot more sense. He wanted to see how much of the world Sung could make his own. This serves as an interesting bit of nuance since it ties back to Sung's ability to drink infinitely. It's a clever nod I personally really like towards Sung's character.
Yeah, I agree.
The novel then proceeds to rearrange some stuff I know we'll be getting next episode, but there was one scene we probably won't be getting for sure. It was the moment the Reapers Guild got news of a new S-rank themselves. The chief got word from his contact at the association, but when he called to find out more about who this new S-rank was, his contact not only informed him he'd just been fired, but also took full accountability for the wrong he'd committed. As it turns out, Chairman Go found out people were leaking information, then took it upon himself to fire those people personally. This was something he'd never done before, so the fact he was doing so now really got the Reaper Guildmaster thinking. He couldn't help but wonder if maybe the chairman had some sort of vendetta against him. I mean, why forbid the leak of Sung's identity now when the same measures weren't taken 2 years ago with Cha?
Yeah.
Combine this with the fact Choi and Beck already have this information, and that really made it seem like things were working against him. The chairman had—
The thing, yeah, that I can imagine he would be feeling like, does this guy hate me and me alone? It is curious when you think about just how much of a fucking wrench in the system Sung Jinwoo actually is. All of them wanting him, all of them wanting him on their side, because to get him immediately tips the scales completely in all of their favors.
had also facilitated Beck's departure from the Reapers Guild, so you could say Mr. Go single-handedly orchestrated the Reaper Guild's downfall. Where it was once the #1 guild in the entire country, it now struggled to keep up with the top 2. I'm gonna quickly switch things over to the scene with Hwang Dong-soo now because while it was for the most part the same, there was good reason for the deputy chief asking the question that he did.
Okay.
The reason he wasn't fully convinced Il-hwan was a monster was because clear footage showed him saving people from the destruction. The chief had never heard or seen of monsters doing that, so he genuinely thought maybe Hwang was mistaken. Hwang then countered by asking if he'd ever heard of a human emerging from a gate, providing a fair enough argument for the chief to accept. He would then say nothing on where Il-hwan was going and instead focus solely on getting revenge himself. All he needed was a couple of artifacts, of which his guild had plenty. In fact,
okay.
if they added up the value of all the artifacts the Scavenger Guild possessed, the total would easily surpass the annual budget of a small nation. So, suffice to say, Hwang was quite confident. This brings us to Sung's own perusal of artifacts, leading to that revelation artifacts were expensive. Like, even with 1.7 billion won saved up, that still wasn't enough to buy anything useful. This made it clear just how difficult it was for a hunter to thrive, since with good items ranging from the millions to billions, there was a good chance a hunter would spend their lifetime unable to purchase any on personal funds alone. So, with money needed now more than ever, Sung knew he would have to wait for his S rank. The thing is, his official reassessment was still 2 days away. There was a moment when Sung believed his refusal to join the association would make that longer, but Go's heartfelt smile was one Sung believed to be genuine. After 4 years of minding hunters and reading their expressions, he got pretty good at knowing exactly how other people really felt about him.
This is something I always point out with Sung Jinwoo as well, is the fact that he was working in this industry for so long at the bottom, and his knowledge was his best weapon. And now he has the strength, he also still has the knowledge and battle IQ, it makes him so incredibly formidable.
Sung still wanted to do something in the meantime though, so searching the recruitment boards was the only thing he could do. It was as he did that he would notice a lot more opportunities available than ever before. As for why, well, it turns out Sung's monopoly over C-rank gates had left a lot of people jobless. He had left freelancers without work for a week, and now it seemed like they were trying to clock in some overtime. C-rank gates had zero value to him
that
now,
makes a lot of sense.
While it would have been nice to freelance in a B or A rank gate, you'd never find a makeshift squad trying to do those. If you did, you'd essentially be signing up to die. So that forced Sung to search somewhere else, leading to his position as a miner.
Miner.
Now, rather than
Makes
start
sense.
that and stop halfway through.
Nice.
I think here's a good place to end the episode. Once again, there was an assortment of small cuts and big cuts, but overall I think the anime's still doing fine.
I agree.
Let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree, and if you liked the video, then leave a like.
Shout
Be
out
sure to subscribe
AniNews.
to know when the next one comes out too.
Shout out AniNews. Shout out AniNews. Go subscribe to AniNews right now. Link in the description. If you are not subscribed to AniNews and you are watching these reactions, that's just really mean, okay? So change that right now, because AniNews is the whole reason I'm even able to make these reaction videos, is because AniNews puts all the incredible effort and skills and knowledge into putting these, by the way. And it's been really cool watching AniNews grow even more and more since Solo Leveling Season 2 has come out. So shout out AniNews. Go subscribe to their channel. They're awesome. A link to their channel is in the description. Yeah, I want to end on that note as well. I want to point that out. I truly think the anime is doing an excellent job. Now, I haven't read the books, so I cannot compare on a level that AniNews can in any way, or a lot of you can either. But as someone who has watched anime, I can say right now, Solo Leveling is doing just fine. The anime is brilliant. It's addictive. It is epic and wonderful. And the characters that have been introduced, mainly Sung Jin-woo, are just captivating, you know? So I cannot compliment the anime enough. I've seen some people moan about how much is left out, but not many. Like I said, I really feel like most people are really happy with the decision the anime has gone, and the content that's being left out has been adapted in a way that doesn't make you need it. Which I think is nice, where you have the optional videos like AniNews has given us, where you can have all that extra content if you want that extra content. And I think it's really nice because they're spoiler-free. They're created in a spoiler-free way for anime viewers to watch and enjoy. And I've never once watched one of these videos and felt like anything was a spoiler. If anything, every time I watch these and I then go into the next episode, I really feel like my knowledge for the characters and the names and the situation is so much better than it previously was, that I appreciate the episodes on a bigger level, a bigger scale. You know, that's how I personally feel about these, and I love it for that. So yeah, a huge shout out to AniNews, these awesome videos. The mining thing I'm curious about. I didn't realize it was simply just because of money, but it does make a lot of sense, especially when you think about that he was just sorting out all the sea dungeons, and they're now pointless to him, which is why he wanted to get his re-evaluation to begin with, you know? You're not going to get any freelancer dungeons below B rank, really, you know, and you're not really going to get any B ranks. So it's impossible for him to just jump in these dungeons and make money, because it's not really how they operate. He has to be part of a guild, you know, and the only way he can do that is by re-evaluating himself. He assumed he would be S rank, but honestly, he only needed to be anything above E to be able to take part in these other dungeons. So that is what he needed. He was never going to be accepted as an E rank to take part in B or A rank things. They are usually reserved only to guilds. A guild wouldn't want him if he was an E rank, so the only path he had left was his re-evaluation. That was literally it. He can keep doing what he's doing behind the scenes, but his contract with his friend ran out, and that's what was making him money to begin with. So now that he's no longer making money from that, and he's saved what he has, he's only going to start bleeding into his savings. And the money he does make from his quest that he does within the system is only money for the system store. So if he wanted real world money and be able to get real world artifacts, which is what he's trying to do to help increase his levels and stats, then he needs money. Which again, goes all the way back to what we just said, the re-evaluation. Meaning that everything kind of makes sense when you think of it that way. The re-evaluation was something he just had to do. He had no choice. He needed to do it. He has two options. He has two avenues that he's going down, and it's the real world and the system world. But to get artifacts, he can keep gaming the system, or he can buy them. And that is what he's doing. Jinwoo realized that pay to win is the best. So that's what he's decided to do. And it actually makes so much sense when it's laid out like this, because little things like that you might just not properly analyze, but when it's spelled out, it all suddenly makes sense, you know? The relationships between the characters and the guilds, how they're all looking at him and each other, and what Jinwoo is actually feeling and what his actual goals are. Now, the main thing I'm curious about is that meeting with the other S rank, you know, her not covering her nose around him, her bumping into him from behind. Part of me is kind of just hoping that they just go in and solo the boss together, although it's not technically a solo if they do it together, but that'd be really funny. Obviously, they can't do this because it would shut down the dungeon and cause a massive loss to them, like the guild, and obviously I imagine he'd get in trouble for that. But if they don't do it, then how is that meeting going to go? And that is something I'm curious about as well, and I guess we'll have to wait a few days to find out. Well, I hope you all enjoyed my reaction. If you're not subscribed to my main channel, when I check out the weekly episodes of Solo Leveling, you should be as well. That's G.O.T Games. I'd be surprised if you guys... How many of you would just subscribe to this channel? That'd be really surprising. But if you aren't subscribed to this channel, please press that button. We're super close to 50,000 subscribers, and then we are going to be on our way to that big 100K. So please help us reach those milestones by pressing that subscribe button. Have yourself an amazing day. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, my friends, you will see me in the next video.